So the Tampico Madero area is really, really well developed. I was kind of surprised when I got there, but it's a very large city. And it's so large, I think there's 4 stakes in the city itself and 1 temple. The city has everything you need in it, from Walmart to what else? I mean, there's movie theaters, but you obviously can't go. So there's Walmarts, all sorts of stores that you would want. It's really cool because it also has, the city center, which is just, this nice metropolitan area that mixes history with modern. Lots of cool shops to visit and everything. That's where all the missionaries go to buy their souvenirs before they leave. Everything that says Tampico on it, shirts and shells and stuff. Tampico and Madero, the cities themselves, are urban, but then at the same time very suburban. I mean, it's very sprawling and very large, not like, big skyscrapers like we have or anything. Everything's a couple stories tall, or the buildings in the center, they're probably 5 or 6 stories tall at the most. And so everything's on a low level, but because of that, it's all very spread out, and there's a lot of people who actually live in the city. And so each area varies a whole bunch, but there's a lot of people, a lot of streets. I personally don't like working in the city because I feel I don't know, I feel like it's not as open and that I'm more like restricted. In my other areas, I just had the whole town, and so I could go wherever I wanted. But then in a city it's different because you have area, you have limits, and so you can only go, so many blocks this way or that way without leaving your area. But overall, the city is a pretty big city. I'm not gonna lie, I was very surprised. Tampico, like I said, is a coastal city, but it's also, because it's a port, is also it has a few chemical and gas refineries in it. So it's also like a petrochemical kind of place. And so there's a lot of people who work at the plants. There's a lot of people who work for people who work at the plants, and there's even a whole medical giant hospital for people who work at the plants. And so that's a big business there, as well as the seafood industry, shrimp and fish. A lot of people dedicate themselves to that. A lot of people, that's their job, that's their career. And Tampico, historically, has been known to flood. There have been severe floods in Tampico where the water in some areas has risen up to 10 or 12 feet. But I never got to see anything like that. You just see pictures all over the place of the city with just all of its streets flooded and people going down the streets in boats. And it's kind of really funny because you're like, wow, I've walked to there. And so like, wow, how could that be under 6 feet of water? And so, I mean, it's really amazing. But obviously, I hope that doesn't happen in the near future. The cost of living in Tampico, all missionaries, they kind of stick to a maximum of 2,000 pesos a month there. So in all of the mission, so 2,000 pesos a month is kind of like $120. Yeah, something right around there. Maybe a little bit more. So $120 a month for an apartment, and that generally can have AC, a water heater. I mention these things because we don't think about them in the US, but in other countries you actually do. And yeah, it's perfect for 2 missionaries, just the right size. And so at $120 a month, that's pretty cheap as far as compared to living in the US. But there are areas where it's even cheaper, and there's some areas where it's a little more expensive because it's a little more affluent area. It's a little more, kind of rich, and so you have to spend a little bit more to get a nicer apartment. Well, to get an apartment there. And so some of the missionaries do have a little bit nicer apartments, it seems. All the apartments in the mission practically were 2,000 pesos and under. And so in my time in the mission, the least I ever spent on an apartment was 1,500 pesos. So that's less than that's $80 a month or so. And then the most I ever spent actually was 2,500 pesos, which is about $200 a month. It's actually less. Wow, that's way less. And so, I mean, there's definitely that max. Usually 2,500 in a nicer area is the most we ever paid. And this was a bigger house. It wasn't just an apartment at the 2,500. It was an actual house. It had 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, living room, kitchen, dining area, and so I mean it was a decently sized house. Crime and safety in the mission. You'll hear a lot of news from Tampico and the surrounding areas about them being really dangerous areas, because in a way they are dangerous from the fact that it runs up the coast, it runs along the drug route. Tampico is, part of the drug route. There is a lot of violence and a lot of crime in and around that area. But the amazing thing is, as missionaries, it almost never even touches you. You hear about it, you might see something, but almost nothing ever happens to the missionaries. In my entire 2 years in the mission, I think I knew of 3 elders who had their wallets stolen in my entire mission. Out of over 200 elders at a time, there was probably only 3 during my entire mission that had their wallets stolen that I knew of. And I knew pretty well, because I was in the offices and I dealt a lot in these things, and almost nothing ever happened. But you should be wary of things, especially in Tampico, the city itself, because there are sometimes in the summer, whenever it gets dangerous, there are gunfights. So there's maybe it's between rival gangs, or maybe it's between the police and these gangs. But either way, we practice procedures in the mission where if you hear gunshots, and if they're close by, you drop down to the floor, and you make sure, you kind of look around from the floor, make sure nothing's happening, and if someone's close by, you stay there, you stay put. And there's a whole procedure for everything that they teach you. But I never had to implement that in my mission. I did hear shots fired, but I was never close enough to anything to actually act on it, other than just going towards my house, getting closer to home. And so that's basically just the best defense in a situation like that, just being as close to shelter as you possibly can. Other than that, it's a really safe mission. I mean, you could walk around with your camera all day long and no one would steal it, no one would do anything. I mean, obviously you're not going to do that because you'd look a little bit like a tourist, but it's really safe as far as that goes. And just be wary and you'll be fine.